Alrighty, believe we are going to be good to go. So today I am going to be covering 3 horror books. Hello again. Forgot to introduce myself, but hello again. I'm Paul from Paul Reads, and today we are going to be covering 3 horror books. It's going to be Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez, If You See Her by Ania Ahlborn, and Take Your Turn, Teddy by Haley Newlin. Okay, so let me talk about these books. Just going to get right into it without any kind of intro. So, first off, let me talk about If You See Her. This is one of the, excuse me, this is one of the Ania Ahlborn books that I actually haven't read. I have a very, find it, I have a very popular video here about Ania Ahlborn that's on my channel. That has a spotlight of all of her books, and this is one of the ones that are newer for me that I haven't actually read and haven't done a spotlight on. So let me talk about it. Let me pull this up first off here. The house on Old Mill has stood in an open field for longer than Jesse Wells has been alive, its crooked windows and jutted turrets tormenting the kids of Warsaw, Michigan, the way only a haunted house knows how. Everyone imagines that something terrible lurked within the house's abandoned rooms, especially Jesse and his 2 close friends, Casey and Reed. But when Reed chooses the house as a backdrop for his own suicide, childhood ghost stories are transformed into a nightmare that sends Jesse into a downward spiral of grief. Nearly 20 years later, Jesse stands on the collapsing steps of the house that snatched away his best friend. Casey has asked him to revisit their old demons, if only to help them find closure that's long overdue. But tragedy finds them once more, and Jesse is left forever changed. Now left to cope with the disaster that has become his life, Jesse must unravel the mystery behind the house that has terrified him since he was a boy. To fall is to lose anything he has left. To fail is to lose everything he has left, but success might come in an even higher price. Okay, I enjoyed this book. I enjoy everything that Ania Ahlborn has done, and this is no exception. She writes really good characters. She builds tension really well in this story. There is kind of a bit of a little love triangle between Jesse and Casey, and I believe her name is Lou Ellen. I forgot her name, but there is a woman involved that has kind of a little bit of a love triangle in there. Obviously, you can tell by the title, If You See Her, there is a her involved in this story that kind of grabs Jesse, and he kind of gets obsessed with this her in the story, and it just, the tension builds, the obsession builds, and you see basically Jesse, who is this pretty normal, very stand up teacher in this town of Warsaw, and you see how slowly but surely he slowly starts to get affected by what happened to him, by what happened in this house, and it slowly consumes him. He slowly gets obsessed. His family and his friends try to console him, try to help him. They're sympathetic in the beginning, then slowly but surely they get a little bit more trying to helpful in the beginning. From sympathetic it goes to helpful. Then it becomes to getting annoyed. Getting afraid of him as well because he starts to change. And you see this, and this just kind of goes through the whole book. And it's really well written. Does Ania Ahlborn have better stories than this? Yeah, there are a couple of books that are better than this. But if you're a fan of Ania Ahlborn, I don't think you wouldn't like this. I think, it does have all of the interesting story about it. It kind of does have a nice hook as far as what her is. And you find out everything about the actual backstory, so it kind of builds a backstory. And like I said, Jesse is a very interesting character, and there's not much to say about the story. It's not a very large story, but it's good enough for me to really enjoy it. I definitely got sunk my teeth into it, and I would highly recommend it. So that is Ania Ahlborn's If You See Her. Next book I'm going to talk about, had really high hopes for. Um, this is Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. Let me read this synopsis here. It's a local legend. No one is sure if this Camp Slaughter place is real or not, but a group of college kids renting out a cabin deep in the woods of Pennsylvania will soon realize the truth. They'll realize the danger too, or rather, the cannibal out in the woods will bring danger to them. Now, this is an older book from 2019. I'm trying to catch up on some of my readings. And I had really high hopes for this book. First off, I believe Rachel from the Shades of Orange really loved this book. It's a slasher story, which I like slasher books. I grew up in that time. I'm an old fart. I grew up in the time of actually the whole slasher movement of films, and I really wanted to like this book. Honestly, I really thought, okay, this is gonna be an interesting book. And first off, let me get the good out of the way. There is the villain here. Ignacio is the villain here. I would kind of classify him as kind of a mix between a Freddy a Jason and a Leatherface. He's kind of a mix between them two. He has the whole Leatherface as far as wearing other people's faces. He has the whole kind of imposing large figure of like a Jason, and the kills that they have in this story are really good. It's definitely like the jump scare type things are really good. And again, I really like that. It reminds me, the kills kind of remind me of, if I would pick a movie kill, I would pick like Hatchet. If you've ever seen the Hatchet series, the kind of intensity of those kills, that's kind of how the kills are in this book. And all that stuff is great. I mean, the creepiness of the way he stalks his victims is really good. But then there's also a problem. There's a problem I have with this story is the cast of characters. Let me give you a little bit more synopsis of what the story is about. Basically, there is this Lakewood cabin, which is supposed to be the most secluded cabin in the woods, and some disappearances happen there. And there's this film crew, Molly and Emerald, or the two people in the film crew, who are investigating paranormal. They do paranormal documentaries, and they're investigating this area, and they find out from this basically conspiracy person called Harold that there's supposedly a hidden camp next to near this cabin, near the Lakewood cabin. It's this hidden camp where they call it Camp Slaughter, because this is where people die, disappear. First, the investigators are believing it's a paranormal thing, that there's ghosts, but Harold doesn't believe it. He believes there is actually a killer cannibal there. That's where Ignacio comes in. In the beginning of the book, Ignacio actually takes a hostage, and again, all the scenes with Ignacio, all the scenes with him in the hostage, all the scenes where he kills people, I enjoyed. I think they were great scenes. I thought they were, it was great tension. But the characters, Molly and Emerald, who were the paranormal movie crew, I just wasn't really that interested in them. They kind of make, Emerald says he's kind of like supernatural sensitive, and they kind of try to hint about a supernatural concept that goes on there. I think they only use it to try to pay off later on with this one character, Noel. It's basically they use the supernatural element to kind of pay it off at the end, and it's kind of cheap in my way. So let me get with the kids. These are like, obviously the camp counselor victims that you would see in this kind of story. There's Fred, who has a hot for Noel and invites her to this party that Gavin is throwing. This camp party that they're throwing. Gavin invites a couple of people. He invites like Brooke, Vanessa. I believe there's another character named Fletcher. He brings his little brother Wayne, because he has to bring his little brother Wayne to the actual camp, and they go to this Lakewood cabin, and of course they find Camp Slaughter. Ignacio finds them, and you see where this is going. It's basically the setup for the story. The problem I have with this is, like I said, I really weren't interested in the characters, and to me, as a horror fan, there's only two things I like. It's got to be atmospheric. It's got to be, it could have good jump scares. It could be, creepy. I like all that, but I also need the characters in those settings for me to care about them. They don't have to be good or bad characters. That doesn't matter, but I have to care about these characters. And I didn't care about any of these characters. Very, very real. I didn't care about any of them. The only ones that were good were Ignacio and the person that he had captive. All the other characters, I just could not get into them. And sadly, that just took away from me. I mean, this would take a book that could have been like a 5-star book, I think, if he would have just made me care more about the characters. Instead, just turned it into like a 3-star average book. Again, it had like a really one good part as far as really terrifying, as far as the kills and the way he stalked his victims. I thought was really good. But when I didn't care about the people, it got to a point where, like, okay, fine, you kill this person, you kill that one. I didn't care. And the ending kind of left on a cliffhanger. Because I did like the way this author wrote the villain and wrote the actual interaction between the villain and his hostage. I might read more by this author. I might actually want to read more about Ignacio. But I couldn't really recommend this book, sadly. For me, it just was something that I didn't think was good enough for me to actually like. Again, I can see other people liking it, why I give it a 3-star. I think it's an average story, but for me and slashers and what I know about slasher kind of stories, I would have wanted something a little bit more. And that's my take on Camp Slaughter. And now the last book is from I guess a relatively new author here, which is Haley Newlin. And the name of the story is Take Your Turn, Teddy. So let me read this one. No one knows your darkness like your own shadow. Nothing has been normal for Teddy, not since discovering the harsh identity of the monster he had living with his whole life, his own father. Teddy and his mother leave that behind to start over in a small Indiana town. He unveils an otherworldly evil he calls the Shadow. The Shadow tests Teddy's vulnerability and growing sense of isolation, poisoning his mind and conjuring a vile killer in the making. A year later, Officer Leonard Strode is called in to offer a consultation on a case similar to the most brutal and scarring of those he's worked on before. One is a case of Jackie Warden, and the other, Teddy Theodore Blackwood, 2 missing children. As he and 2 other officers follow the trail of clues, Strode is haunted by the ghosts of his own past and is horrified to find them wreaking havoc on his present. When both Teddy and Strode finally meet face to face, they must confront their inner darkness as well, or else be consumed by it. I really enjoyed this story. I'm gonna be honest with you. I honestly, I think this is a 5-star story. I really respected the way this Haley Newlin wrote this story. I'm going to say that this is actually a second book in Haley Newlin's library. This is technically a prequel to his first book. You don't have to read the first book, but he does talk about it a lot in like the introduction, and he talks about that book, so it might get you interested. I personally would say read this book. Read this book first. If you're interested, read the second book. I did read the second book. Read his first book. That takes place after this book. This book takes place in the 60s. Well, actually, I guess like late 60s, early 70s. I'm not really sure around the time. I just know Nixon is president when this takes place. And it's really well done. The character of Teddy and the character of Officer Strode are amazing. I mean, the way the story goes is basically Teddy sees his father having an affair. He sees his babysitter and his father in a compromising position. From that incident, things happen, and like I read in the introduction, Teddy moves to Indiana with his mother. This is a house that her parents owned, but they live in Florida now, so they have this house. And he meets this entity in the basement, and he is feeling guilty about what happened, about his father and mother, how they broke up. He feels guilty about it. He also feels homesick. And that's when this entity kind of, decide they want to be his friend. And again, you see this dark turn, what happens with Teddy. And it's really well done. I really like Teddy as a character. I really was interested in him. And when Officer Strode shows up, in Michigan with this kind of, similar case that he's worked on other cases, similar kind of case that he has to work on, and how it links to Teddy and links to another case in Indiana, you find out that Officer Strode has some issues as far as he has these, delusions, or, they call them illusions, but he basically has these problems where he's losing his grip a little bit. He has really bad anxiety. And there's actually a seriously cool It kind of reference. And if you didn't catch Officer Strode, there is kind of a nod to Halloween, which I really did like. There's Officer Strode, and there's another one, which if you read the book, you'll find out. There were two nods to the movie Halloween I thought was really cool. And like I said, I can't really say much bad about this book, except for the fact that if you get a chance to pick this up, I highly recommend you pick this up. If you want to find out about a new author and you want to find a story that's creepy, that has supernatural elements, that kind of also has a nice backdrop, that you want to find out about these characters and the way this works. I really like the ending too. Actually, this is one of the few books I actually kind of really like the ending of, and yeah, I can't praise it highly enough. I think it's a really cool story. And those are my reviews for the three books: Take Your Turn, Teddy, If You See Her, and Camp Slaughter. So if you've stayed through all of this, I would say thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.